Welcome, welcome, welcome back to another episode of the Lightdrop podcast, where it's just two friends talking creativity and beyond. And today, yet again, we are three friends because we're joined by someone who I'm excited to catch up with. We worked together a while ago now, but since then, both of our careers definitely have kind of taken off in their own unique ways. And this industry is super small. So this person that we have on the show today is someone who every time I mention his name, it's, oh yeah, I love that guy. I love him. That's my guy. So super excited. We've got the head of CG at HOPR, Josh Planz, on the show with us today. Josh, thanks for joining us, man.
Dude,
Yeah,
super happy to be here.
yeah. Thanks for coming through, Josh. Really appreciate it. We talked a little bit before we started recording, so just loving your energy so far. And I want to get people just as excited as we are about you. So let us know, what's your origin story basically?
Mm,
How did you get into VFX? How did you become head of CG at Hopper? Just give us an
yeah,
intro, man.
sure. So, I grew up with a lot of art in my background all my life. I grew up in the East End of Long Island. Um, my grandfather was a poet who published a lot of books, and he greatly encouraged everything art in my life. And my mom nurtured it. I come from a family of artists and teachers, and every day was a learning experience. Every day was something new to experiment with craft. There was just plenty of nature all around me, tons to learn from and explore, and I never had a lack of mentorship. And so, cutting through middle school and high school, which I was somewhat of the weird art kid. Was always drawing. I think probably got in trouble so many times just because I wouldn't take notes in class. I was just doodling the whole time. But so school wasn't super engaging. But when it finally came to college, lo and behold, I didn't even end up doing anything art related at first, because everyone was like, "Oh, well, if you want to make money, you got to get into computers." And this is not to date myself too hard, but this is like pre 2010. I think it was like 2005, 2006, and I'm like, all right, computers, cool. So let me get into web design, because the word design's in there, and sure, that'll do it. So I go through, I go to Farmingdale, and I'm going through a year of that, and it's all programming, and that was like the worst year of my life, because I went from like thinking design and all that, and ended up being just all numbers and coding, and I was absolutely bored out of my mind. And about a year out, I just completely failed out of school, dropped the program.
Mhm.
Um, and I kind of bounced around majors for a while. I was doing graphic design. I was doing fine art. I was kind of just like playing around, because I wanted to see what would stick. And finally, I came across this new program at the time, and I remember the flyer. It was like some really low poly CG elf, and they were like, "Oh, we got this new thing where there's this program called Maya, and you can make characters." And I was like, "Okay." I'm like, "That's cool." And they're like, like video games. And I'm like, "Oh yeah, yeah, okay, all right." And then the first year of that was like Photoshop and Illustrator and Flash, and I was like, "Where's the characters?" Like, but finally getting through all that, playing with Maya for the first time, and having this like, it's like it's like sculpting with clay, but like without the mess, and it was really fascinating just seeing 3D represented in the screen, and someone who grew up with a lot of consumption of video games and cartoons and movies and whatnot, and Toy Story was super cool and all that. I was like, yeah, this is I think this is it. So I caught the bug, and that was where I stayed for forever, and moved on to like Alfred University, where I went there for my 3D animation degree. And when I graduated from there was kind of around where the housing bubble and the stock market and everything was like really, the economy wasn't doing great, and so I was thinking about doing grad school at the time and seeing how the job market was basically at its lowest at that point. I was like, I think that's a sign. So I went to SVA for grad school. Met a ton of amazing people, including one of your previous guests, Shang. Um, and getting out of grad school, it was really interesting because I was going through undergrad and grad school kind of with that like almost immature idea of like there's only Pixar, and there's only DreamWorks, and I got to get into those. That's
The
it,
big ones. Yeah.
right? So I go through all those. I throw in my applications, my reels, blah blah blah, to only the major studios because that's it. That's where I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
You know, get no responses, obviously, except for Pixar, who was nice enough to give me my rejection letter, and I used to have it framed, but it was such a weird reality slap in the face. I was like, oh, okay, so I worked really hard, and I just was convinced that's really what it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Artistically and even mentally, I was just not ready. I had a long road ahead of me for developing my eye, developing my ideologies, and you know it was interesting. I didn't know what to do at that time, so I started applying around to everything in New York. I was still in New York at that time, and interesting enough, I actually started working with independent artists and fine artists, and linked up with amazing creative minds like Ian Chang, and we were making procedural movies where they every time you watch them there's something different because they were like films that were kind of at the time, I guess these days you can call them ones AI driven, but they were just like these programmed films that had objections, and whatever the objection was, it was procedurally guided to make that objective, which was different every time. And it was just actually really wild because I went from wanting this like the ideology in my head of like wanting an Oscar or wanting to work at these major studios to actually being part of these things that got into like the MoMA and traveled the world with these kind of amazing films and amazing installations. And it was amazing to see that even graduating with what most would say is a commercial art kind of degree, to see that there's still like this pure art form in there that is not commercially motivated. And it was the kind of the thing I needed to see. I needed to experience that to really help, guide myself mentally, emotionally, and artistically. And I kind of stuck in that field for quite a long time. And it wasn't until probably 2016, 17, something like that. I was finally like, I should start playing around with the idea of studio work because as much as the fine art world was a lot of fun, it doesn't pay very well. And so, I was living with roommates. I need to um, up my game. So reached out to fellow classmates, got my foot in the door, and started working at studios. And it was quite amazing because I went in as a generalist because as we are all bred to be generalists in schools. I never specialized in anything. and I never really wanted to because there's always that shiny toy. If you're rigging, you're like, oh, lighting, you're lighting it. Oh, modeling, like there's always right.
Yeah.
There's always something that like it catches your eye, and so
Yeah.
like I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to be a generalist. I come in there, my first studio, and right away they're like, "Do you know how to rig?" I'm like, "I guess." I'm not particularly like special at that, but I was able to do it. And they were like, "Great." And I rigged for a project. And immediately when I was done with that, they were like, "Oh, can you rig for this next project?" I'm like, "Hey, money." And I rigged for that one. And I kind of just like kind of permalance at this one studio for a while. And then all of a sudden I was a rigging artist and I rigged for, a couple of years and it was actually super easy to stay in rigging and the studios were coming to me. And because
Mm.
the thing is like such a minute amount of rigging artists in the city. And I think in general, I think it's a very interesting blend of technical and artistic talents that not everyone's kind of into. And, I think a lot of people are scared of it because how technical it is, but you're talking to someone who I've just mentioned, I hate coding and I hate like that kind of, so I never really needed to be that strong in it to succeed as a rigging artist. There was always so many other ways because like in anything in 3D, there's, 1,000 ways to do the same thing.
Mm.
And I think if you have your resourcefulness and your and your drive not to want to learn coding, you can figure anything out. And so I just stuck with that for a while until I started leading jobs. I think in 2018, and it was at that point where it's like there's that fork in the road. I guess when you get to a certain part of your career, and it's like you can either become that like really good senior artist, you hone your craft in that specific thing, or you go into management.
Mm.
And I was already teaching at the time too. I was teaching SVA. I think I started teaching there at like 2014. Um, and really, when it came down to leading anything, it felt just like being a teacher. You're just inspiring and putting a direction on everyone's movements, and that's really it. And you kind of stand back and you let them, stand on their own.
Mm.
And so to me, leading and teaching, it's two sides of the same coin. And there was not much of a learning curve when it came to leading because of that. Um, and so then I went from leading to um, supervising and tried my hand in visual effects for a few years. And then finally ended up as head of CG at HOPR, where it's a lot of fun because it's after doing visual effects for a few years, I respect it as a medium, but it wasn't for me. I cut my teeth on stylized, fun characters,
Mm.
and there's not a lot of that in visual effects, right? So
No.
as much as I love explosions, I don't really like directing them, and so I went back to characters and stylized, and I think I'll probably die doing that because it's my favorite thing.
Nice, man. Yeah, I love hearing that, especially because let's see, when we worked together, it was around 2019 or so, I want to say
Mhm.
ish. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that's about
And
right.
so, and I had none of this context then. Obviously, I just kind of knew you as you know the the do all rigger that just could knock it out easily, right? Everyone loved, great energy. I definitely got those kind of teacher um vibes from you too, where you were very kind of like eager to lend a helping hand or
Mhm.
offer kind of assistance in that way, beyond just the technical, um and so hearing that is interesting because it kind of makes me think of it almost seems like the inverse of my path, where you, I guess you could almost say your rejection letter from Pixar in a sense was kind of like a blessing in disguise, maybe
Mhm.
looking back on it. Um, in my experience, it was kind of like I was fortunate when I kind of left college in that I was kind of immediately in that VFXy world, movie credits, kind of cool films and stuff. And so I had that itch scratched like early. And then it was like, okay, well, now, now, now what? Am I satisfied with this? Do I want to, where do I want to go? It's like I was kind of looking for that fine art kind of itch that you had, where you were traveling the world and you were doing things like this. And so all that to say is I think of, hearing your story and kind of like comparing it to mine and kind of seeing where you are now. It's like, w- what would you say is your like your balance at now, like between that artist in you, that artist being kind of satisfied and feeling fulfilled. Do you really feel like you're in a good place with that, like, because I feel like a lot of people chase that.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's interesting. I had similar. So when I did have my few years in visual effects, um, I did get to work on some cool movies like Barbie and shows like American Horror Story and movies, and recently was one like Mean Girls, and it was fun to go to the theater and see your name in the credits and whatnot, and but it was never like seeing my name like in the credits, whether it was an episodic or a movie. It was more like, huh, neat, that's cool, and I never got that like that fulfillment or like whatever, like. And it's funny because I remember for the first half of my career, it was like a dream, and it was like, if I get this, it's going to be that thing I need that like really shows that I'm an artist and that that this was all worth it. And again, I think it comes back to that like that growth that happens, that maturity, because um, I think chasing credits is definitely a huge motivating factor. It can make you get up in the morning and just get it, like just really grind. So I find nothing wrong with chasing that. But I think from myself and from many others, it's definitely not the thing that's like, okay, like I've done it. Like it's all I needed in life. Like you reach it and you're just like, okay, well, there's almost like, you realize that this is actually a project that was under someone else. You were a hired gun, you were a tool of the trade for pulling off someone else's idea. And there's never been that satisfaction. I've never felt satisfaction like that in almost any job I've ever worked on other than my own work. So I think in like 2014, 2015, I worked on a film with a good friend of mine who I think for about a month to 6 weeks, we did nothing but work on this film. We woke up in the morning, and then from like 8 in the morning till like midnight, it was just this film. It was all shot on green screen in one day, and then it was just 6 weeks of work of post, and it took a lot out of us. It was a lot for two people to do. I mean, it was like a 5-6 minute film, but the sense of accomplishment and pride that we got out of it when it was released to the world, and it was actually a big driving factor in learning and realizing a lot of stuff, is that one, I never leveled up so hard other than because like I was so like that was the time I leveled up the most in my life, because it was like, well, I want to pull off this and this, I need to learn how to do it. It was like it wasn't like a job where it's like, someone's got my back or someone's gonna be able to pick up upon this, I'll be able to ask for help for this. It was like, I gotta learn how to do this. And so I learned V-Ray at the time. I had no idea how to use it. I was still coming off the mental ray train, which is, again, I think I'm showing my age. But
Yeah, that's like cobwebs.
Yeah, right, man. There's nothing better than having to manually turn on global illumination. but but yeah, it was so great to get that film out there. It did really well. It was a film that again I got to travel with and really get that kind of satisfaction I think that I was always chasing. And from there, it made me realize that like, sure, I put in 110% in everything I do if I'm at work, anything. But when it comes to my own personal projects, that's where the passion's going to come in. And so I've I'm always working on personal projects. And it's the number one thing I always recommend to any artist. And I don't mean any starting artist, I mean any artist. Like,
Yeah.
if you're in this game, you're in this studio, you're in this industry where every 6 months, most half the stuff is out of date. You got to relearn it. You got to get better, right? And to me, it's never been better than to do that with personal projects, because then there's an objective. It's kind of a slog to go through like a YouTube tutorial and be like, okay, and then you do this, and then you do that, and you do this. And that's great. It's cool, sure. But like to put it in production and have something in the back of your mind that you can stick on the screen, and those new things you've learned make it happen. If that is like super glue for learning things, like sticking in your mind, you'll remember it forever. I remember any kind of like party trick I ever learned for like pulling off a certain thing. I'll always remember it because it's like that satisfaction where like you're like, oh, cool, it worked, and I pulled it off, and it looks beautiful. And then there's almost like that. You almost get mesmerized by it, right? So there's a dopamine hit there that I think that is more powerful than drugs. So I don't know. I think personal projects, personal work, that's always been the way to go.
Yeah, I was gonna jump into that. So we briefly talked about one of our favorite creative directors, artist Ash Thorpe,
Mm.
and speaking on personal projects, something that really like drew me to him was that project he did for, I think it was Akira, and he's obviously always releasing like really interesting projects. So, are there any personal projects that you've recently worked on that just got you amped up, and you're like, I gotta either share this or talk about it, or I could just do a TED talk on this?
Um. So yeah, actually, interesting enough. So after all these years of working on digital things and working on things on the screen, you know, I think I've definitely been, and I've reached this a few times in my career, but I've reached like yet again the point of burnout, or the point of like, um, and I know it's a term that gets thrown around a lot, but like it definitely happens, especially when you're really passionate about something. You're going 100% at it. It's like you're sprinting, 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 and then even though your mind wants to keep going, your body doesn't, right? Um, and then sometimes it can be the other way around, where you're physically capable, but also your mind is just like it's depleted. And I was actually like that recently for quite some time. I stopped personal projects, and I couldn't put pen to paper. I couldn't do anything. Like, it was just tough. And so I beat myself up for a while, until I realized that, well, that's kind of stupid. That's definitely not going to fix anything, right? And I allowed myself to kind of heal for a while. Just allowed it. I'll come back to it. I know it will, because it's such an ingrained part of my life. And slowly, I started picking up other interests, still art related, but not CG. Like, I picked up photography, and then I was like, oh, I want to try the piano, and then I played with clay for a while, just messing around with different things, just to get the juices flowing.
Yeah,
And recently, I got into 3D printing, and
nice.
it's a beautiful combination of digital and physical. And actually, I think with it starting probably in a week or two, I'm gonna open up my first Etsy shop, and I want to start
Nice.
selling, some products, some physical things that you can hold in your. Because there's nothing more
Yeah.
satisfying than holding it, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's something we'd never do. You work on a Kroger commercial, you're not picking up a Kroger character in your hand, right? Or
No.
anything as such, but you could, and that's the thing. Like, you
Mhm.
could print it out and paint it and
Yeah.
whatnot. So there's something very satisfying about that, and I think that's yet another thing. My experience are anecdotal. It's obviously not one size fit all, but I think one cure to my kind of burnouts is playing with other mediums. And I think once you find a medium you love, it just gets the creative juices flowing again. And once they're flowing, you get back into the digital world, because it's something that you're going to return to. It's just when, right? And now, yes, I'm working on personal projects again. I'm working with another friend now, developing a children's show kind of IP that we want to pitch eventually. Um, and so, like, my personal projects, I think, are starting to become a bit more ambitious, because now I'm talking about things where I can sell, things I can grow, things or whatnot. But for years, these were just things I'd love to, spit out these quick kind of like digital sketches or vignettes and throw them on Instagram.
Mhm.
And yeah, some of it was for that dopamine hit of like getting likes and comments, and that's fun. But a lot of it was just to like, I made something and I was super happy and I wanted to share it. And I think there's an artistic growth that comes from putting it out there, because it defeats so many things that we have. Because, like, I have not met a single artist that doesn't have some spectrum of imposter syndrome, perfectionism, any kind of self-doubt, and making something even when it's not complete and just throwing it out there is, I feel like, one of the cures to it. Because
Mhm.
it's
Like
like, mhm.
it's like it just like an analogy that just popped in my head is like your artistic bladder.
Yeah, right, right, exactly.
It's like it's uncomfortable. It's like, oh, I just got to like it might not necessarily be the medium that I'm used to. Like maybe it needs to be something else because it's like my brain is just scrambled with this one because I'm also using it every day for work. And so like but I still have this creativeness that I want to, you know, get out in some way. So yeah, like you said, just playing with different mediums, okay, piano or clay or and then it just kind of gradually like you just kind of get more comfortable and you just feel like scratched that itch and it's like in doing that you replenish that, those juices.
Mhm.
Yeah, and there's obviously, you know, it's not the only. It doesn't have to be art related, and
Yeah.
some things is, um, it needs to be not art related sometimes, just so that, like, it's almost like a palate cleanser. And
Mm,
you know, for instance, traveling is always a great palate cleanser for me. I fully recommend always trying to travel, and it doesn't have to be like going to the other side of the world. I'm talking about like a day trip out of the city to go hiking, or something that changes your surroundings and gives you that what is it, that big word that we always perspective. You always need to change your surroundings. You need to see other opinions, other faces, other everything, to really understand that when you're in a bubble for long enough, it kind of gets stale, right? And you need to leave that bubble to let the bubble recharge. When you get back in, you're ready to go. And it doesn't have to be traveling. I always recommend it, but obviously, that requires time and money. But anything you can to just change it up is going to be mentally, physically, spiritually, in your favor. I mean, tenfold. It's the cure to a lot of things. And you know, like last year, I went to Iceland for 2 weeks.
Oh, dope.
Yeah,
nice.
and
Yeah.
it was,
Iceland is like a different planet. I see
Yeah.
pictures of it.
yeah,
Doom.
dude. Well, it's funny you say that because it's not only is it a different planet, it's like 20 different planets. It's like every 50 miles you travel there, it's a completely different world. It's
Yeah.
phenomenal. And it's definitely one of the cheapest because it's a 5 hour flight. You know, they have some sort of like,
Really?
yeah,
Looking at flights now. Hold on.
yeah, right. Dude, book it up, man.
Oh man.
And besides like the car rental, it's pretty damn cheap because you're not going there for their
Oh
food. Their
wow.
food is not what they're known for.
Yeah.
You're going there because you want to see like it looks like Lord of the Rings, and then all of a sudden it looks like
Dune.
Dune, yeah, dude. And then it looks like Mars, and then it's so cinematically different every time, and it's mind blowing, and it's something that rewards you for exploring, and you push your body because you know I maybe only talk for myself, but I'm a very soft, mushy 3D artist because we spend so much time in front of the computer. So, like, to beat yourself up in a big hiking trip to make it to this like destination where like you see some grandiose waterfall from Prometheus or some set piece from Game of Thrones is like, wow, like it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Do any photography there? I know you mentioned that
I did,
kind
yeah.
of picked that up.
Yeah, that was my first trip with like I would call like a professional kind of grade camera, something that
Mhm.
wasn't my iPhone because
Yeah.
I would travel for a while and I always take pictures with my phone and they're fine, but like what I also love doing specifically love about photography is that it is something that helps you train your eye in terms of composition and framing something, something that you can do with the phone, but sticking your eye into it and then like closing out the world and just seeing that square, it really leveled my eye up in terms of staging something and composition and whatnot, more than like reading any given. I've read so many books on composition and cinematography and whatnot,
Yeah.
and that's fine. That's great. It's like cool. I know the rule of thirds, neat. But it's all
Yeah.
like, well, how about instead? There's a goat running. Let me
Mhm.
see if I can frame it and make it look interesting.
Yeah.
Which Iceland is just full of what I thought was wild goats at first, just because there were so many running around. But they're all tagged and bagged, and
Yeah.
anyway, the
It's
point is, it's wild, man. I would definitely recommend it.
it's yeah, there's something about that like tool, like
Exactly.
whether it's like a chisel or, the camera, it's like something, I don't know, maybe primitive about it where we just like to be hands on in some way.
Yeah, exactly. It was specifically why I got a Fuji camera because like it gave me all the dials. Like
Mm,
it was less like pushing buttons on a screen and more like you know it really gave me like, oh, okay, I really got to actually think about exposure and for years you'd have the digital like in Maya camera and you'd be like, okay, I kind of understand f-stop, just play with it until you get a cool depth of field, neat.
Mhm.
But in real life, when you need actual real understanding because all of a sudden you're like, why is everything coming out dark and out of focus? And so, learning these things in real life translate to the digital more than you can ever believe. It's wild, and it's really something that helped me again grow as an artist. Was every time I learned something real world and applied it back to the digital, it really, we all know you're supposed to like know the rules before you break them, but we love skipping that step. It's so easy to skip that step. And then eventually, because it's not a matter of if, it's when you really have to learn those rules. When you finally do, then you're like, okay, like so if I learn anatomy and then I break it the right way. I go from making a noodly character to a noodly character that actually looks like it could be grounded in reality, and it is again another point of like satisfaction where you level up your brain in terms of not just learning how to push the button, but like how to push it in a way that's got meaning behind it and direction behind it. And again, it's just such a moment of satisfaction for me.
Hell yeah. I want to kind of highlight something that you mentioned a little bit earlier that I thought was super interesting. So you said that when you were creatively burnt out, you kind of paused and you took a break and you took the time to sort of jump back into it. Is that something that like you developed yourself, or is that something that you noticed? Because I find that very interesting. Because for me,
Hmm.
I'm really bad at this. Whenever I'm exhausted mentally, physically, I'll just keep going,
Yeah.
and it'll be like 2 or 3 weeks, and then I realize, oh, I'm exhausted. I should have just gone for a walk or spent like 2 or 3 days uh, not doing anything. But yeah, just if you could comment on that, like, is that something that you learned on your own, or you just
So
picked it up somewhere?
yeah, no, it's interesting you said, because I think the number one way I learn anything in life, only true way, is the hard way. And I used to punish myself about that, but I just learned that's the way it is. I got to learn it the hard way because I'm a bit stubborn.
Hmm.
And so, um, like I mentioned, I've burned out a few times, and I've tried just working through it, or I've tried taking little breaks, but not long enough. But my last burnout was actually, it was actually kind of medical. I actually landed myself in the hospital in the ICU for a couple weeks,
Wow.
from really just burning the candles at both ends for months at a time, not
Hmm.
taking care of myself physically, stressing myself out, like not being able to separate myself from my job. And, there's that term, work yourself to death. Well, I just about did it.
Yeah.
And it was insane. I remember coworkers and friends literally being like, "Are you all right, man?" Because and I, without it being since I'm the driver here, I didn't notice anything truly that wrong. I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. But people were noticing the personality change, and just a lack of I guess what I usually am. I'm usually kind of like I nerd out hard. I'm usually like, I almost have like golden retriever energy, especially when it comes to CC.
Yeah.
And I was not having any of that.
Yeah.
And I actually specifically remember one day, I'm like, I was in a meeting one day, and something wasn't right. And my body I just got basically full body pain, and I had to turn off my webcam and my mic, and I'm like, just getting worse and worse and worse, and I'm like, oh my god, like something's truly wrong, and I'm like freaking out, and all of a sudden here, blah 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 blah, right, Josh? And I'm like, oh fuck, oh okay, and I'm like, all right, we're gonna turn on the webcam,
Turn it back on.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm like, all I got to do is say yes, and we're done with this meeting, we'll be good. And I turn on my microphone, and all I could get out was a yes. Everyone knew there was something wrong, and they
Yeah.
stopped the meeting. My boss called me up. He was like, "Turn on your webcam." I turned on my webcam. He gasped because I think I was like sweating profusely. I was like, and he was like,
Yeah.
"Go to the hospital right now." Literally, my first response: "There's only a couple hours left in the day. I got this."
Oh, no.
I was just
Oh,
like, tunnel visioned.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I went to the hospital, and yeah, no, it's just a lot of self neglect and a lot of just redlining stress levels, got me to that position.
Mhm.
And it took a few weeks in the hospital to recover. It's something that I'm still, on the rise. I'm still recovering to this day, but like, it really showed that work life balance was more important than anyone could ever stress. Everyone, big buzzwords these days is like work life balance, mental health and whatnot. And they're all just pieces of like the noise that's buzzing around. But I wish they were pushed harder, because they're not just like part of these buzzwords. They're so important. It's wild how important they are.
think
Um,
Yeah.
I think it's like it makes me think of it, like it's not as it's nothing new, right?
Hmm.
It's nothing new for years and years and years and years. And I feel like for so long, it's like you said, it's just been like, oh, it's just how it is. Like
Hmm.
this is just the way it is, especially like in the West, you know, and like in our culture where it's just like,
Hustle
you know,
culture.
yeah, hustle culture. And so when you know, like you just described, you had that experience, you're just like, oh no, it's, you know, this is just, maybe I'm just not managing it well myself. You know, maybe I just
Hmm.
gotta like work on it. And so like, I mean, I've experienced that. I feel like it's well, I don't know. I don't want to speak on other industries because I'm not in them, but
Yeah.
I definitely feel like in our industry it's if not like if not the most prime for it, then definitely up there because it's everything we're doing, especially professionally for clients and stuff. It's got that level of subjectivity to it.
Hmm.
So it's not like you can just kind of objectively get it right. It's like notes and revisions and deadlines, and then you you're second guessing yourself with your art and your technical abilities, and it's just this whole thing. Um, Combine that with whatever your path was to that point, right? Like from the time you left school, right? Like
Right.
what your mentality was. We're trying to get into a job, trying to prove something, trying to figure this out. And it just like you said hits that red line point, and it's uh it's a shame because it's when you really think about it, when it's happened to you and you really think about it, you're just like it really is not that hard to to not do that to yourself. We're doing it to ourselves.
It is,
So it's
and
like a
there's
shame.
like a mental block you get at one point where it's like you know, because I think social media does a lot of this. So you see these amazing artists, you're like, oh, I got to push harder because they're
Yeah.
amazing. You know, you do
Yeah.
a lot of comparison. You know, there's always like fellow classmates or fellow artists, and all of a sudden they come out with something amazing. I'm like, wow, I got to push harder. They're killing it. Like, and it's like this unneeded burden that we're constantly putting on ourselves. And it's like, you know, you're going to grow as you grow, and it happens naturally. And you know, to I guess to go back to I think from that you asked again about you know what I learned or where I learned you know these ideas of um, actually stepping away and whatnot. Um, a lot of it was just a natural occurrence. You know, I've these were things I've read about in the past, and these were things I've seen in podcasts and whatnot. And actually, one of them was something I recently learned from on Lightwork. Liz recommended this amazing book called The Perfectionist Trap,
Hmm.
and uh, amazing words in that book. And there's so many other ones like it. A lot of ones that like even that Ash Thorpe recommended, like you know, Mastery and so many others. But like again, it just becomes the idea of learning the hard way seems to be the best. And it was like instead of like, okay, I'm gonna work on more projects, I'm gonna work on this. It was finally like, dude, I'm just gonna chill, man, and instead of being like
Yeah.
this, just you
Yeah.
Hmm.
know. And for I think for the first time in years, when I did that, like it was like I didn't realize that my normal baseline was here, and you know we're supposed to be here. That's supposed to be the normal baseline.
Yeah.
This is supposed to be reserved for fight or flight. That's not supposed to be
Exactly.
normal.
Exactly. Sustained. We I mean we did a whole episode on the perfection trap. And then we talked about also, I think it was a couple weeks ago, where there's this book I'm reading um where the author is kind of talking about like the art of um creating a business.
Mm,
And when I read it, I interpreted it through the lens of freelance contract, you know, client kind of work, where we kind of view ourselves as that, like viewing ourselves as this work of art. Everything that we're doing, like not only the work that we're creating, but also the process is a work of art, right?
Yep.
Like the way we treat ourselves, like like to be able to say at the end of it was like, yeah, not only did this come out amazing, but I also was very diligent about the process and making sure that I was taking care of myself too,
Mhm.
like, throughout it, so that at the end I can look at it and say, like, no, I really did that in a way that's like, yeah, that was, everything about it is just beautiful, right? From this, and beautiful and relaxed and calm and exciting. And there's just no, like, all this stress and angst and stuff that we inject into things is just us. There's no one else kind of requiring it. We just kind of do it to ourselves.
Exactly. And it's ridiculous because it's like, if you have a car, are you going to redline the car every time you get in? Are you
Hmm.
just going to slam the gas pedal every time? You're going to destroy the thing. And
Yeah.
it's the same thing with our brains. And it's so, I know that's it's such a simple, I'm simplifying the heck out of it, but it kind of is that simple. We have a piece of high tech machinery inside our heads. We got to give it maintenance. We got to give it
Yeah.
a chance to breathe and oil the damn thing. And it's like, I really feel like, again, like we're sitting in front of these computers for so long and it causes a lot of interesting kinds of damage that doesn't add up in your brain because it's like, well, I'm not killing myself in the coal mines. But no, you're sitting there letting things rust practically in your head and in your body. And, you know, it's funny how we talk about how things like exercise and whatnot is a mental can help you mentally, but it's purely chemical. You're pumping more blood into your brain, you're pumping more endorphins, you're pumping more dopamine. And these are all things you need to keep that creative flow going. And it's so easy to neglect,
Hmm.
or it's like something as simple as like, and I guarantee you all do this, or you have at least. It's like, you start out in your chair in the morning, you're sitting up straight, you're like, all day I'm gonna be like this, and then 8 hours goes by, you're in the shape of a question mark,
Yeah.
and you're like, why am
Croissant.
I hurting so much?
You're like, it's quick to zoom in. No, no, no. You got to bring your face.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right. Or like you catch yourself doing it multiple times a day, and you're like, oh shit, I'm doing it. Okay, hang on. All right,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
And you're back in.
Yeah.
And that's my routine, no matter how many times, and I have the standing desk and this and that, and it's like you forget you have them because we love to just tunnel in and get to work, and it's so unhealthy.
I feel like I was going to deviate. So I don't know if you want to, because I was going to talk about games, but if you want to,
Oh, okay. No,
yeah.
I mean, hey, games in general, because I was just curious. I mean, we were about to ask him two completely different things. I was whatever you want to answer, Josh. Maybe you can blend them together.
Sure, sure.
Um, I was just kind of curious, intrigued about your teaching. How you
Mm.
mentioned like that's kind of something that you've kind of naturally fell into. You do a little bit of that at SVA. Um, that's the vibe I've always gotten from you.
Mhm.
When we worked together, was just very kind of like um supportive. Very supportive artist, right? Like in that way. Um, how's that? How'd you kind of fall into that? How do you feel? About that?
So even when I was a student, at SVA, I was kind of always just the guy to go to for advice, technical or artistic, because I don't know. I've always enjoyed helping others grab whatever is in there and stick it on the screen. It's like intriguing because as artists we all have really cool ideas, and it just comes down to if we have the right tools, both physically and mentally, to get it on the screen, to get it out there, or get it out in paper or whatever else, right? So um I don't know, I became like almost addicted to seeing the aha moment in people. It's really such a rewarding thing to see where, like, they're like, I want to pull this off, I'm like, cool, to do that, this, and this. And then when they do it, they're like, that's it. And then there's like that sparkle. And I don't know, just something very, very cool about that. And when I started teaching in 2014, it felt so natural just to, have these 15 to 20 eyes on me. And I don't know, it was just always so much fun. Classes were always so organic for me. Like, I never liked structured classes. And so I kind of kept them they've always been such a loose kind of natural thing where, a lot of my classes would be focused on one giant project throughout an entire semester. I was never a fan, especially when I was a student. I hated week to week projects just because it wasn't enough time to develop something, And like anything, we have highs and lows where we don't get a lot of work done or times where we explode. And to shove all that into a week, like, you're never going to make anything portfolio worthy like that.
Yeah.
So I always made my classes one giant project where we would cover a ton of the pipeline, if not everything, to get things done. And because of that, three major things happened. One, students would come out of the classroom with one polished piece of work that they could stick in their reel right away. And two, it kept it engaging because it wasn't like they had to completely change their mindset every single time and panic to catch up. There was just some weeks that come in and students would be like, well, I didn't really do that much this week. I'm like, all right, well, play catch up and let's see your progress next week. And because of that kind of more that ease, that understanding that it's not always going to happen, it allowed students to like breathe and get work done. And then the third one, which was to my benefit, was there was less homework on my side because I wasn't prepping and figuring out courses and structure. I'd usually come into class, I'd be like, where did we leave off last week? Oh, that's right, okay, let's get into it. And we just do it. And I don't know, I just think that because I'm always having fun, I'm nerding out, I'm excited to show them this, that, and the other thing, that it would be infectious to the students. And I always like to keep my classes entertained because nothing worse. We've all had them. There's always that one teacher that was like monotone to like just, it was a slog to get to the class. He'd have like the bobbing heads, and I never wanted that. So I always wanted to keep things fun, exciting, engaging, and it paid off. I've had so many students throughout the years who'd reach out to me and they're like, dude, I still think about your classes or the things you've taught me. And when I go to SIGGRAPH and I see people, in that I taught that are like at Pixar or working at Marvelous Designer or anything else, and they're just like, they see me and they light up, and I'm like, well, shit, I had an impact there, and there's something really, really rewarding about that. I love that. And last year, 2 years, I did step away from teaching for a while just because at the supervisor level, balancing that with teaching was too much for my plate. And, I will be taking it back up whenever classes are available for me to teach again. Again, now that there's a easier work week and a better work-life balance, it's something I can return to now. But I have missed it, man. Teaching has always been just such a big passion. It's, I don't know, just something very ingrained in my brain.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. My question was going to be, so you mentioned uh, playing video games earlier. You said, you had some conflict sometimes about playing video games.
Mm-hmm.
And Jamil and I, we love games. Jamil, I don't know if you know, Jamil used to be almost like a semi-pro Call of Duty player. So he's serious.
That's
So
awesome.
it was Halo. It was Halo.
Halo, right?
Halo, right on. All right.
But yeah, so and the last a few episodes ago, Lizzie came on and talked about the same thing, kind of like the guilt of playing video games. So I just want to know: do you still experience that guilt sometimes, or are there any games that you play that you're just like, man, forget it. I don't care if I feel guilty. For me, Legend of Zelda, I've
Mm-hmm.
been playing it. I think I
Yep.
almost beat the game. I stopped because I was like, I kind of need to give myself a break. But
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
any thoughts on video games or games in general?
So gaming's always been a big part of my life. In fact, I'm a big believer, especially now more than ever. The most creative stories and the biggest stories that are being told are in video games. And I don't think you'll ever get a connection with a character any more than in a game because it's someone that you're controlling. You end up like mirroring yourself onto the character. It's so easy to get lost in a grandiose world, and that's usually what I stick to. I usually stick to really heavy story based games. I grew up where Final Fantasy VII was like a childhood like core memory,
Yes.
and where you're just like this dude just saving the world, and there was just so much to it with action and adventure and like love triangles and just so many complex storytelling elements that were told within the other thing is it's being told within something that takes 50 to 100 hours to complete. Like
Yeah.
sure there are some shows that can last that long, but movies have to like compact things into hour and a half to 3 hour type deals, and even if they're a trilogy, that's still not even close to some of these games.
Afternoon, the
Yeah,
trilogy.
right. Yeah,
Hour.
like we're able to binge whole entire seasons of Netflix, and there's not a lot of like crazy story driven games that you can binge in one go. It's something that you end up investing in and getting invested in terms of getting attached to these giant world building elements. So those kind of games in general, like when it comes to like Resident Evil games where they're just so cinematic, and these Final Fantasy things where just these fantasy adventures that you're lost in just such a gigantic systemic game where everything from the different kinds of animals that exist in the planet to political structures to religion are all well thought out. And I think what was it back in 2020 or 2021 when Final Fantasy remake came out
Mhm.
was one of the only times in my life where I was like, I told all the studios I was booked for a solid month. I just played that game. So it
There
was,
you go.
yeah, right. There was definitely no guilt at that point.
Mhm.
But yeah, then for a while, yeah, there was that guilt. There was like, you'd play it, and there was such a funny TikTok that was going on for a while where I saw like they showed some. It was like playing as a millennial now, like in your 30s in the game, and they show a guy playing a game, and it's like you need to make money. Why aren't you making money? You're a piece of shit. And
Yeah.
it was too real. It was way too real, and I felt that so often. But again, especially in this past year,
Yeah.
just learning so much more about mental health and taking it easy and being kind to yourself, self-compassion needed more than ever. And it's allowed me to finally get back into gaming and be like, look, this is for me, and it ends up being something that helps you. That's the thing, is that like playing games, it's funny how this works, and it's exclusive, I feel, to what we do. Playing games, consuming film, all of stuff, it helps you so much.
Yeah.
There's so many times where you're like, when I was playing Breath of the Wild, and I was like, oh my god, do I need to explore this style, like
Yeah.
this cell shading, or like the idea of a grandiose landscape. Like, how do you convey size and scale like Breath of the Wild? It's like there are so many questions that you
You're
can break it
inspired.
down. Exactly. There's so much inspiration in gaming, especially like so many games that know how to suck you in and make you a part of it within the first few minutes. There should be research there alone to be like, okay, cool. How do I do that? And with the birth of Unreal Engine 5 now, and what that can do, like real time, like real time realistic renders is like a game changer, and we can do that now, and you can download it right now and jump in and do it, and it's phenomenal. I've been playing with Unreal 5 for quite a while now, and now 5.4 came out, and it's got all these new fun tools that like allow you to do motion graphic-y kind of stuff now, and it's like, again, it's like you know, it allows you to definitely be more stream of conscious, because you can just see things as they are in real time, which I love. And you're also, you're in a tool that has made some of your most favorite memories. So many games are
You
Unreal
know what
based.
it's capable of.
Exactly. So I don't know. Gaming's definitely a major part, especially as you mentioned, Zelda. The
Mm.
world building in
So
that is
okay.
unmatched. Yeah.
So you guys are mentioning Zelda.
Yeah.
I so my brother-in-law, um he's on summer vacation now. He has on Steam, I guess it's a N64 emulator,
Mm.
Mm.
and he has Ocarina of Time.
Yep.
Ooh.
And so he was playing it, and he was like, "Yeah." So I downloaded it. And he was like, "I never like really played it." And I'm thinking like, you know, like what? Like I'm thinking back to when I was 7, 8. Like I played the hell out of that game, and I had all this crazy nostalgia and stuff to it. Like like he turned it on. All of a sudden, I just hear like the music. All of a sudden,
Mhm.
I remember the music. It's just all these different things about like that game where I'm like, this was amazing. But at the same time, I was like, was that just nostalgia? Like
Hmm.
we've been playing it over the last week or so, and it was crazy. I've been honestly kind of like, I won't say in awe, but I've been like really wowed because I was like, this game obviously absolutely does not stand up graphically
Right.
to to any of the games or anything that's out now. But I was like this storytelling, like this is a good game. Like
Mhm.
I'm, 25 years later, 26 years later, like playing this. And when I played it before, you know, I was young. I wasn't really following all the dialogue. Like I didn't really know where to go. I was just kind of slashing things up. But now I'm like following. I'm like, damn, this is a great game. And I remembered it all these years. So it's like that's like the impact that games can have on you, and they can really kind of like suck you in that way. And it's just like it really is like wow, like the storytelling and the world building, and then combine that with a game like Zelda where you have the puzzles and you're just like, dang, like that was satisfying. Like that was different. I'm
Yeah.
not just doing the same
That,
thing
yep.
for 8 hours. Like I'm doing this now. It's a different puzzle. This is a different puzzle now. This is a different boss fight. Like, you know, and then at the end of it, you're like, why was I beating myself up over this? Like this was
Exactly.
this was fun. I wasn't just sitting around, doing nothing technically.
Well,
Mhm.
especially because the amount of the different mediums that you can witness in a game, in any kind of game these days, is unmatched. Like, sure, when it comes to animation, you can see tons of different styles, but in gaming, it's like, I don't know if you ever played a game like Gris, where it's like it looks like
Mhm.
watercolors, or but you haven't played that phenomenal game, or like what was that one, Stray, where you're just like playing a cat.
Yeah.
It's
Oh
like
yeah.
Yeah.
there's so many like just different, like,
Love that game.
can you make a movie where you just play a cat with no dialogue for 2 hours? I don't know. Maybe, but like, would it keep you as engaged?
Try.
Yeah, like with Stray, you're playing a cat that can't convey what it's truly feeling through dialogue. It has to do it in every other way, but you still care for that thing for the 10 or so hours you play the game.
Mm.
And I don't know many mediums that could hold on to you that long for without a single piece of dialogue. Like, maybe Wally was a, but that was still it's a 2 hour movie. Could he last 10 hours?
Mm.
It's a very interesting.
Like a game like we talked about this before on the show, Jeff. It Takes Two. Have you played that,
Mm,
Josh?
Yeah.
very
It
fun game. Absolutely.
It Takes Two. When you combine that to where you're doing it with someone else,
Yep.
also like you can't achieve that with any other, with the movies or the books. It's like
Absolutely. And even when we were talking about earlier, you were playing, you were pro Halo player. Like, dude, competitiveness and sportsmanship and gaming
Yeah,
is
that's
some of my best, like, um, social memories. Was just like, in arcades, or playing, drunk Mario Party, or anything as
yeah,
such. It's just like there's such a community behind all of gaming that, I don't know. I don't see in many other digital mediums.
yeah. I love esports. That's my jam.
Oh, absolutely. I do keep somewhat engaged with like Tekken and Street
Hmm.
Fighter. I used to follow that a lot more, but I don't know. There's just something. It can be as engaging and as um, almost cult like as football or any other sport, and I don't know. There's just something really magical about that.
Yeah, some of my best video game memories. There's in New Jersey. There's something called NJ Halo. It's right up there in Morristown. Um, at least that's where it used to be. They may have changed the venue, but it's like in North Jersey, and it's like Tekken, Street Fighter, Halo, Call of Duty, and Madden. Like they used to have these in person like competitions where it just be like hundreds of people
That's
showing
awesome.
up to play whatever their respective game. I used to go to those like on the weekends. That's where I started playing like competitive Halo, and then it's like on top of that, it's like okay, well, you know, it's not like signing up for your for your township's soccer team, or your high school soccer. It's like you gotta go online and you gotta meet some people to to like form a team with, and then you gotta figure out to like you know are we gonna practice? Are we gonna do it? Like it's this whole interesting kind of like social thing tied to this virtual game that's on top of that, like introducing to like the fandom of a world like Halo or whatever, like on top of that where you have the story and everyone's like just excited about the game. And yeah, I love it. I love it. Love that stuff.
Absolutely. Like, if you talk to any of my coworkers at Hopper, you'll know that there's a deep rooted obsession, mainly from me, uh, with 4-player Pac-Man. And a lot of our rap parties, when we finish a project, we go to Barcade, and
Hmm.
we go and we hog up that 4-player Pac-Man for the entire night. And there's just something as simple and as dumb as 4-player Pac-Man is enough just to, you know is a great team building. It's just it allows just so much, like, I don't know, so much social bonding. Like, and again, which
Yeah.
it's a little circle eating little dots, and that's enough to be like such a to kill time for hours, and that's phenomenal. It doesn't always have to be, Master Chief saving the universe. It can be a little dork just doop 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 doop, and that's enough. That's what's so beautiful about. You go on like Steam, you can buy a $5 game that someone slapped together, and it can just hit just right. It's
Yeah.
very interesting.
I was gonna say Jamil and I talked about this one game. Oh man, what was it? It was that, like, it was on Steam. It was like a death match or something like that.
The one you
Where
the one that you like recommended where
Yeah,
you
just something, just those indie games where it's like, so it's like
yeah.
a Roblox character. You get dropped in a bar and you just fight to the death.
I
And
love that.
it just keeps getting more and more ridiculous. You end up in space fighting like a dinosaur or something. But it,
Really.
yeah, some of these, I definitely want to check out a lot more indie, because I don't think I I visit Steam enough to be like, I know what's
Yeah,
going on. But
Xbox, like the Game Pass has a bunch of indie games
Mhm.
yeah,
on there too. And it's like another medium too. It's like because I see like it's just like a storytelling kind of outlet, because I feel like in the same way, like you said, that dopamine hit of making something cool, putting it on Instagram, getting the likes. Like I can only imagine as an indie developer how I would feel to be on Twitch watching someone else play my game or my
Absolutely.
like
Yeah.
story that I kind of made and like commenting on it, talking about it. Like I imagine that's like one of the most satisfying, even if it is like you said, Jeff, so just being dropped into a bar,
Yeah,
Just
right.
to fight
boxed
to the
into the
death.
death.
It's
Um,
funny too. Like what it what hits these days is like I don't know if you ever played like Getting Over It, but it's just a simple game of a. It's like a guy who's like he has a sledgehammer and he's his bottom half of his body is a pot, and it's just about climbing up. And it became this like sensation of a game. And the guy himself admitted when he made it, he just used found assets and put it together, and it became like this art form.
hmm.
And there's a lot of games that are just I feel are almost like I would almost call them like art house kind of games. One artist that I
Ed,
oh please
no, I was gonna say Cuphead. You know that
Cuphead
game?
is a brilliant example, especially when it combining like 1930s hand drawn kind of animation. I mean, they took it in and made it into a TV show at this point. Like,
Yeah,
it's amazing how many games do that. And I don't know. I just find that again, not many mediums come that quite in that degree of like combining everyone's love for this kind of medium and their enthusiasm for sharing it. We all can nerd out on games, but there's not many other like there's obviously fandoms for movies and TV shows, but I feel like universally games can definitely bring out the nerd in everybody.
talking about anime before we started recording. Like, same thing with the different like we've talked about this a little bit on the show before, Jeff. Like just the uh the art style, like combining the art style of a certain anime. Like there's so many out there, not in like a bad way, but like there's so many animes out there where like people will find it and it'll feel like it's there. Like, oh, like I found this anime that I enjoy, and it's kind of
Mhm.
like this thing that I found that I, quote unquote discovered, and you feel um this like this closeness to it, right? Like it's like it really kind of speaks to you and this other kind of small community of fans. And you just, I don't know, it kind of reminds you when you see those mediums like indie games, animes, um it kind of reminds you like, yeah, not everything is like you said, big Pixar movies,
Right.
products, the ads, and it's like just as much joy and satisfaction coming from just like making some stuff that excited you and sharing it.
Oh, exactly. I mean, when it comes out to anime, obviously you can see with the art on my wall. Even I'm very inspired by it. And nothing to me is a finer example in terms of how anime can move you than literally any Miyazaki film. You
Yeah.
know, there's just he moves mountains with his stories, and sure, there's a plenty that Disney and others have made that also do so, but you know, not many other films have shaken every emotion out of me like a Miyazaki film. So I don't know, like if you watch um, anything like Howl's Moving Castle
Mhm.
or Princess Mononoke, and you don't shed a single tear, are you really human?
Yeah. It's like not liking puppies or children. It's
Yeah,
like
right.
you better cry.
That's right. It's phenomenal, and then
Yeah.
admittedly, is probably another thing that got me into wanting to do this as a career because I feel like specifically like Ghibli films were ones that were like for the first time when I saw these kind of things, I was like, oh, you can make animations with real like adult themes and tackling real like issues. Coming out of a childhood of Tom and Jerry and Bugs Bunny to see what you can truly accomplish with these kind of animes was absolutely insane to me. So definitely put me on a long road after that.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, Josh. So as we kind of to close off, what is do you have a favorite movie scene or just something that just stayed with you. I know you mentioned Miyazaki films, but if there's a specific scene
Hmm.
that just like you're like, I saw this and it changed my life or affected me in a way like that stayed with me.
So yeah, I mean, I guess it would. I would definitely have to admit that Princess Mononoke uh, moved moved me unlike any other film. In fact, I have a full sleeve depicting some of my
Oh
favorite
wow.
elements from it, and but what I loved about that film so much was seeing how hatred can be conveyed in such a way to blind you, and how releasing yourself from hatred can be. Sorry, being my doorbell is going off. 1 second. Sorry about that.
Okay.
But like to see that kind of raw emotion and seeing it evolve in a way, it's kind of funny to take real life lessons from movies like that, but it really shows you how movies like that can show you how to deal with your emotions, and how to deal with such heavy emotional issues. And that film really, it really stuck with me. Um, and to see, just anything like imagery, like in a Miyazaki film, you can't get more fantastical and grandiose than seeing like the castle from Howl's Moving Castle in a gigantic landscape, and I don't know. You could pick literally any of those movies, and I can tell you how somehow it reached my core and changed my sense of self. And yeah, I don't know. Like I talked about how video games are such a impactful thing. Well, fantastical animated films, and it's not just Miyazaki. Obviously, any hand drawn Disney film, we all grew up with those. God, I wish it would bring back hand drawn animation like that, because it hits so different,
Yeah,
really.
I love that. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of what you mentioned earlier about how, like in Japanese films or just films, um, like overseas animations, anime, they give the viewer a chance to sort of embrace the scene in a very slow way. Miyazaki films are obviously great at that. It just they give you something to think about, and then they give you this beautiful scene to sort of
Digest it.
meditate on it. Yeah, exactly. I
Yep,
love that.
absolutely. I mean, and it's one of the first films besides Disney that I can think of that won Academy Awards and really had such a wide reach, because it was something that was like almost exclusive to Disney films for the longest time. And it's not just Ghibli. There's also and I'm failing to remember his name, but if you've seen the direct any of his films like um, Wolf Children or The Boy and the Beast, Hosada. I'm trying to remember his first name, but anyway, like his films again are just so, they reach into your soul, and to see films that can do that, it gives me the chills, because I can't really think of many live action films that do it. There's just something guard breaking about seeing an animation convey these kind of emotions than you know live action. So it's a medium I'll never see. I can never see it dying, and it's kind of funny to see some of my favorite directors, like for instance Del Toro, recently come out saying he is a animation director only now. Like he has converted
Hmm.
to animation, and he's not looking back. And I'm waiting for Wes Anderson to say the same.
Yeah,
Love that.
that's I love that too. Yeah. I feel like, yeah, when you have movies like that have impacted you, and then you compare them to, well, I guess it's so easy to see the distinction between those and what's just a product, what's
Right.
in theaters and what gets kind of greenlit for It's so easy if you haven't exposed yourself to something like that yet, like Josh is talking about, and we'll definitely, Josh, I'm gonna get all the movies you mentioned. Definitely send them to me so we could put them in like the show notes or something.
Yeah,
Because like if
Absolutely.
you've not kind of experienced that from a film before, and you've only seen stuff that's come out in theaters or that's top 10 on Netflix kind of stuff, it's like once you see that distinction of like, oh man, this was made with with such like intent to really move me, and it
Mm.
did. Whereas this was just to kind of entertain me for a couple hours and then I forget about it, by the time I go to bed kind of thing. Like seeing that, especially as an artist, it's really inspiring because then you can take that and be like, dang, I want to move people like that. I want to have that impact, not just on this surface level, but I mean, I don't think, maybe one day, who knows, one of these directors will listen to this podcast, but just like we said, can you imagine just being someone who's listening to someone else talk about your work that way? Like that's, you know,
Absolutely. And don't get me wrong, Hollywood they still got some tricks up their sleeves. I
yeah.
just finished or I just watched Inside Out 2.
Mm.
Hmm.
Dude, I was 2 degrees from crying. It was amazing.
Oh
Like
yeah,
that's that I mean the first one was incredible. The second one I feel was in a different way on par, but the way they break down the brain in these very likable characters to convey abstract ideas, that's
Hmm.
phenomenal. And so it's while I have been admittedly a bit uninspired by a lot of mainstream media in the past couple of years, there are a few that still come through and blow me out of the water. And it may not, it doesn't always have to be because it's going to make me cry, but like movies like Dune 2, I saw that and I'm
Yeah.
like, you could pluck any frame out of there and put it on your
yeah,
wall. You
Yeah.
know,
yeah,
Denise is, that director is, he's a
Hmm.
true artist. He's insane.
Yeah.
And he's a big source of inspiration.
yeah. And yeah, and I think that's a great place to sort of
Yeah, because we could
close
keep
things
going, can't
off.
we? Forever.
And yeah, thank you so much, Josh, for coming in. Just want to say
Yes, thank
we
you.
really appreciate you, and yeah, just wondering if is there anywhere, if someone wants to reach out to you or content, is LinkedIn the best way? Like,
Yeah, if you want to reach out to me, LinkedIn. It's just LinkedIn. Just find me, Josh Planz. Josh Planz also on Instagram. You can find my doodles on there. Anything that you've seen there is on on LinkedIn. But otherwise, yeah, just keep your eyes out for, like I said, a little Etsy shop starting up soon, and a few more ideas in the works.
hell yeah,
Yeah, keep us posted on that for sure.
Oh,
yeah,
absolutely.
love to hear that. But yeah, I guess that is that the pod, y'all.
I guess that's the pod. Josh, thank you,
Pod.
man. Appreciate you.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So y'all, we've been recording since 2023, November 2023 to be exact, and we've done 25 episodes so far. So today, this 25th episode would actually be the end of what we're calling season 1. It's time to go into hibernation for a little bit. We're gonna take a break to improve the podcast, take our own advice, get some rest. But we'll be back. We're not going anywhere. We're not stopping, y'all. We'll be back with even more heat to continue these sensational conversations on the Lightdrop podcast. See y'all soon. Peace.